Good morning, Warzone kids. Beautiful day on the trail this morning. 1 degree where I am in Vermont. Warzone kids is my term for those of us like myself. I'm a child sex abuse survivor. A Warzone childhood is more like a guerrilla war against your psyche than it was a supportive nursery. As an adult, I live with borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and bulimic. And I think of our soul, our psyche, as a Jenga tower. It's solid at the beginning of the game, but with every bit of harm, abuse, and neglect, you slide a piece out and put it on top. And by the time you reach adulthood, if you had a war zone childhood, your Jenga tower is a tall, swayy, shaky thing, and it's liable to fall down on you. And in this video here, I'm following close on the heels of the 1-inch punch. I'm not going to repeat the whole story. The scene of Beatrix and the 1-inch punch from Kill Bill, where she's buried underground. She got to get out. 1 inch is about the diameter of a human eyeball, about 1 inch. And that's the greatest distance the human psyche can travel, is 1 inch from the inside of your eyeballs to the outside of your eyeballs. That's how I see it. And I talked about borderline in the last video. I'm going to talk about narcissism in this one. If you want to hear more about the 1-inch punch and my views on personality disorders, that kind of thing, look at the last video. I live with borderline personality disorder, and I have a high level of narcissism. I check just about all the boxes for narcissistic personality disorder. And you can watch The Wood Between the Worlds if you want a few retellings of the story of Narcissus. But on the inside of the eyeballs, for the person dealing with narcissism, you live inside a story all the time to, I think, a far greater extent than other people do. I only have access to the one psyche I have. But it's a key feature of narcissism that much of your energy, many of your waking hours are spent putting off almost all your life force into trying to get the people around you to see you the way that you want to be seen. It's a key feature of folks struggling with narcissism that the idea of who they actually are never even enters the mind, really. You are whatever it is that you can see reflected in the people around you. You want to be a certain kind of person, and you need to see the people around you reflecting that back to you. If you want to be seen as a certain kind of man, it's important to you that the people around you reflect back to you their idea that you are that kind of man. Now, if you can relate to this, I'm not saying that it's an element of human nature that we live among other bald apes. We live among our fellow Homo sapiens, our fellow human creatures, and we have to fit in with them. We got to follow the mores. We got to have some kind of spot in society. And it's important that we be seen by others in an acceptable way. That's, I believe, here's how I would put it. Yes, you want to be seen as a certain kind of man, a certain kind of woman, a certain kind of human being, a good person, a nice person, a kind person. It is important to be that kind of person on the inside, but it's also important to all of us, to some extent or other. We feel the importance of being seen as that kind of person from the outside. If you've done something kind for someone, but they misinterpret it, and they think you've done something mean, that really bothers us, right? That's the same kind of dynamic, because you're not being seen for the kind of person that you think you are. I believe that a lot of the elements of narcissism can be understood if you take that kind of dynamic and you just exaggerate it, you got an equalizer setting on a radio or on a soundboard, on a mixing board. You can turn up the bass, you can turn up the treble, you can turn up the middles, the mids. You can think of it like that. And then when the person is in the grip of narcissism, the settings that have to do with how you're seen by other people, they're pegged. They're as high as they can go. They're cranked up to 11. And the most important thing in the world to you, if you're struggling with narcissism, the most important thing in the world to you is being sure that the people around you see you the way that you want to be seen. Because inside is nothing. Inside is a black hole. Inside is a gaping, empty void of despair and nothingness. And you cannot keep your mind on that nothingness. There's nothing there. You can't look at it. There's literally nothing to see. It's a black hole. You have to see yourself reflected in other people around you. Like the way those black holes have that weird halo look because they bend the light that's coming around them. You see this ring around them. Looks like black holes are wearing a sombrero with the back tilted up. There's nothing to see when you look at yourself, just a black hole. You have to see yourself reflected in those around you. And that reflection is distorted and wild. But you spend your waking hours trying to get the people around you to reflect back to you a version of yourself that you can like. That's what's happening on the inside. And I'm a guy that has spent large fractions of his life trying to see myself by seeing its reflection in other people. I've had jobs that had high status. You know, when the people ask you, do you want to be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? That's a penetrating dynamic. And the conditioning in my head, my Jenga tower was convinced I was nothing, a black hole. But I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be a contender. So I sought ways to be a big fish in a small pond for much of my life. I spent a lot of my life as an elected guy in the world of organized labor. I was the president of a union, president of a statewide union. And I got status from other people because of that. They treat you a certain way. They reflect back to you yourself, you think. Well, I got a label. I had a label hung around my neck, president. And I don't have to worry about who I am because I got a sign hung around my neck that says president. Sometimes that actual name tag. Well, people around you have a certain way that they treat people with a name tag called president that's hung around their neck, and that's how they treat me. That was great. A ready-made reflecting pool. People around me would reflect that back to me. Made me feel like a big fish. Now, joke's on me. Because it's all just an illusion. It's all just reflected light. Because they're responding the way they respond to the sign that says president on it. They're not really interacting with me as a human being. Not really. And that is like fentanyl for the soul. I was an addict in my youth. I never touched fentanyl. It wasn't around when I was a kid. I did meth and cocaine and rock and prescription opiates when I could get them. But that's a drug, being treated with high status. And you get addicted to it. Man, it feels good. But like any drug, like rock. I smoked crack when I was a kid. Rock, we called it. The high from smoking rock lasts about as long as the experience of smoking the rock. Because by the time you're in the grips of that specific addiction, and it is a harsh taskmaster, by the time you put the stem down The high is gone. Maybe you get a minute. And then you're lower than you ever were. You got to get more. And crack will bring you to your knees fast because you just can't feed the beast fast enough. There ain't enough money in the world. And if there was, you'd die. You ask Amy Winehouse about that. That's a version of narcissism. Hanging that sign around my neck that said president on it and getting other people to treat me like that. But you can hang other signs around your neck. Doctor, lawyer. I'm not saying doctors and lawyers are doing that so they can have a sign around their neck. But here's a phrase for you. A mask that eats the face. A mask that eats the face. You could have careers that are so much a sign hung around your neck that people are interacting with that sign more than they are you. Doctor and lawyer are two of those. President of anything. CEO. These are all masks that eat the face. That don't mean that you're hung up in it. That doesn't mean that doctors, lawyers, CEOs, and presidents of things are living in the grips of narcissism. But it means that as human beings, they have to cope with the fact that people around them are going to treat that sign like it's them. And they're not that sign. They just are whatever they are. Celebrities. We feel the pull to be famous. Well, you see that person and you see the adulation they're getting, and you imagine how that would feel to be that person getting that adulation. You look in the mirror and you practice your Tony Award acceptance speeches, stuff like that. Well, joke's on you, joke's on the celebrity. If that celebrity expected, if you look at someone, you know, when I was a kid, Marlon Brando was my favorite actor. A Streetcar Named Desire. Stella! He was my favorite actor. And I would imagine what it would be like to be Marlon Brando and have everyone look at me the way I knew that people looked at Marlon Brando. And I imagined what that would be like. Well, that's a nice feeling. Who wouldn't like that? Well, the joke would be on me if the same joke would be on me as the joke is on Marlon Brando. Because if you became that guy with a sign hung around your neck and everyone treating you like that, and you were expecting to feel, you were expecting to feel the way you imagined that Marlon Brando felt when you looked at Marlon Brando, and you imagined how it would feel to have everyone looking at you like that. Marilyn Monroe. You look and you imagine how it would feel to be treated like that. Most glamorous human being, the sexiest, most glamorous, most artistic human being you could imagine. How would that feel? The joke would be on you. The joke was on Marlon Brando and Norma Jean Baker. Because Norma Jean Baker wasn't Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe wasn't Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was Norma Jean Baker. Marilyn Monroe had to cope as a human being, as my fellow human creature, with what it was like to actually be Norma Jean Baker. War zone kid, my fellow human creature, who had to go through life with everyone around her interacting with Marilyn Monroe and their ideas thereof. And her just being Norma Jean Baker. At some level, probably expecting to have felt like she imagined it would have felt to be the celebrity that she was. She worked hard to get that way. And then she had to cope with the reality that the black hole on the inside is still the black hole on the inside. You are still you. Norma Jean Baker was still Norma Jean Baker. I love her dearly. She's a beautiful actress, beautiful actor, talented artist. and had to fight her way through the fact, as a human creature, that everyone around her seems, from my vantage point, to have been dealing with this image called Marilyn Monroe that was never there. Norma Jean Baker was there. She had to deal with that. Norma Jean Baker just was whoever Norma Jean Baker was, and all the adulation in the world couldn't do anything about it. And she had to cope with that. Marlon Brando had to cope with the fact that everyone around him dealt with a character named Marlon Brando. And now I think that was his real name. I don't know. Maybe he had another name as well. The fact that Marilyn Monroe was a person named Norma Jean Baker makes it a little bit easier. But Marlon Brando was just Marlon Brando. He had to deal with the fact that everyone around him interacted with a character called Marlon Brando. He just was whatever he was. And I have no idea. I'm not psychoanalyzing either of these folks. I know Norma Jean Baker died in a great deal of pain and suffering as a human being. I have no idea really about Marlon Brando. But I know that he had to cope with the fact that everyone around him treated him like a character called Marlon Brando. And he was just Marlon Brando. He was just whatever he was. And he had to cope with that fact. And that was his cross to bear in life. But the same thing applies to anyone suffering in the grip of narcissism. That on the inside of the eyeballs, it's a black hole. You feel the void within, the black emptiness within. And you need to get everyone around you to show you who you are, because you can't see anything there. It's nothing but a black hole. That's on the inside of the eyeballs. On the outside of the eyeballs, they still have to deal with the black hole. What is the characteristic of a black hole? It eats everything it sees. Everything that gets too close gets devoured. Black holes have a thing called an event horizon. The event horizon is the point of no return. And you don't know when you've crossed the event horizon. That's characteristic of the event horizon. Astronomers could measure it. You could say for a black hole of this size, if you get within this distance, you ain't coming back. You're going in. We know what the future holds, and it holds a black hole for you because you've crossed past the event horizon and you're going in, pilgrim. That's what it's like to get too close to someone in the grip of narcissism or in the grip of borderline. If I'm living in the grip of borderline and you get too close to me, you're in that dynamic of the trap and the bait and all that I talked about in the last video. You're going in. And if you cross the event horizon, you're going to get caught up in it. If I'm living in that dynamic. I live in the present moment. I practice Zen. I spend a fair bit of my life sitting on a cushion staring at the wall, learning to live in the now and not live in traps of my own mind. But the reason they call narcissists toxic people, these are my fellow human creatures that suffer from this dynamic. The word toxic, if it means anything at all, is another way of thinking the event horizon. Because if you get too close, you have no choice. You're going in. You're caught up in that black hole. You're caught up. The black hole can see you. It's like the eye of Sauron. If you can see it, it can see you. If you can see the black hole can see you, and you're already past the event horizon and you're going in. Something like that. This is why often if you find yourself in a relationship with someone with borderline or narcissism, if they're not, these are all just my fellow human creatures, myself included. I'm engaged in my life, more or less, really, is my full-time job in life is as a pilgrim on the trail to the Western Lands. And what that means for me and other people is my whole life, more or less, is oriented around living in the now because that's the only way that I can't suck everyone I know and everyone I meet past the event horizon into the black hole that is a person feeding their needs, doing everything I can to use everyone around me to reflect back to me a picture of the guy that I want to be, the guy that I want to be seen as. Now, don't take this too far. I have no big feeling of emptiness and hollowness on the inside, but I still have that psyche. I live in the here and now. I live in the Western lands, a place of peace and wholeness where I learn and become what I am. But I have the same psyche. I don't have a different psyche. I have the same psyche. But I know that peace and wholeness are possible. And I know that right here, right now, today, it's also possible for me to give up living in the here and now and disappear back into my own black hole. I can do that. All I have to do is drop my awareness that I'm Ben Johnson on the trail to the Western lands, driving down the road today with the blue sky and rosy-fingered dawn, living in the here and now, not living in the past, not living in the future. I live at a stance of peace with myself and a stance of peace toward my fellow human creatures. And when you're living as a black hole and you're sucking everyone into it to feed yourself, you're not living in a stance of peace. That's a stance of war. That's a stance of famine. That's living as a hungry ghost, sucking everything in. Where does stuff go when it goes into the black hole? It goes nowhere. It becomes part of the black hole. The black hole eats it and uses it to increase its appetite. The more the black hole eats, the stronger its appetite grows. It eats other black holes and grows 10 times stronger. That's a solid metaphor. When you're living as a black hole, you eat everything around you, and everything around you makes your black hole stronger. It's possible to live a different way, Pilgrim. If someone sent this video to you, maybe it's because they think that you're living in the grips of narcissism or living in the grips of borderline. Maybe they got too close. Maybe they're in your black hole right now. If someone sent this video to you and you're a narcissist and I don't like to say you're a narcissist. That's just shorthand language. If you're suffering from that dynamic, if you're living life as a black hole right now, and someone says it to you, someone sends you this video, the feeling that you're probably going to get is called narcissistic rage. What? They think I'm a narcissist? No, I'm not. That's narcissistic rage. The way out of the inside of your eyeballs is to see who you are and to accept the who you are that the person that sent this video to you is reflecting back. What are the success rates? Ask around. Narcissism is a difficult thing to escape because if you're suffering from that dynamic, the awareness that you're suffering from that dynamic is extraordinarily difficult to develop and extraordinarily painful. Ask me how I know. But I'll tell you, if you have a vision for a fleeting moment that that's you, hang on to it. Deal with the pain. Because if that's you, if you're living in the grip of narcissism or borderline, let me tell you where you're living. You're living in that coffin that Beatrix was in Kill Bill. You're living 6 feet under. You're dead already. And anyone that has the fortune to care about you when you're living like that, you are doing everything you can to pull them in there with you and keep them in there. Because it's lonely in that coffin and you want company. The only way to get out of that coffin is to accept the fact that you're in that coffin. And when you're in that coffin, you're already dead. You're in a state of psychic death, just waiting to stop breathing. It's like the world's worst heart-lung machine. You can get out. Peace and wholeness is possible. But it takes a 1-inch punch to get from the inside of your eyeballs to the outside of your eyeballs, and somehow or another to find a way to see that what you are is not what people reflect back at you. What you are is Beatrix in that coffin 6 feet under. You got the strength for that 1-inch punch, Pilgrim. Everyone does. You don't need Pai Mei. You got Pai Mei in you right now. You have that 1-inch punch. For this guy, I'm living on the trail to the Western Lands, Pilgrim. I'm headed to the place of peace and wholeness, the Western Lands, where I learn and become what I am, where I live in the here and now, where it's 7 degrees. The roads are clear, and I'm going to get in a lot of miles today on the trail to the Western Land, Pilgrim. Daylight's burning. Let's walk them together.